at cost basis. But in a declining market, it's not GAAP and it's not conservative, because right now Joe might have a trust fund in his general ledger. I think you've changed already. So previously, he might have a trust fund in his general ledger for $10,000, and when a purchase order or a bill comes in, he'd look at the balance and approve it for payment, and then when they went to replenish the cash from the trust fund, there's only $9,000 in the trust fund because the market's gone down. So if you keep it at market value, then when it comes to the market will be $9,000 in his general ledger, and he wouldn't approve the purchase order or the invoice. So
just in relation to our trust funds, what other than cash do we have? Do we actually have some stocks?
Well, we must have some investment or
some mutual funds.
Yes. For some of them.
MMDT.
For the non-expendable portion of trust funds, the portion that can't be spent. I guess in the past they went out and sought a different investment vehicle, that gave you more interest in an everyday savings account. So they're in these mutual funds, and
Some of those obviously have lost.
Some of them lost money, yeah.
All of those
But
have lost.
actually all of them have lost.
But I'm telling you, you guys are better than your conservative investments have just been good to you this time around. So, I mean, at some point in time, it might be prudent to look at how you're investing them, but probably not right now. This next comment is more self-serving than anything. In Massachusetts, the original budget is often considered anything before the recap sheet's been certified. In GAAP, it's anything before the fiscal year started. So your special town meetings that are held in October are really not considered the original budget. We have to do a financial statement that pulls the original budget per GAAP. And when we use yours, the entries, the special town meetings are all in your original budget field on your reports. So when we try to get the original budget, we start have to peeling it back, pulling out the votes that occurred after June, and to get the original budget.
well, we just went through a series of them in April too.
Yeah, well, hopefully they didn't put them in. There's a field that allows you to put them into supplemental budgets.
Mm-hmm.
So what we wanted Joe to be able to do, and Lorianne, is to just use the budget field for anything that's happened before July 1st, and then everything else is considered a supplemental. I think that this is too late for 2009, but hopefully for 2010.
Right.
That shouldn't pose a problem, should it, John?
No, not at all.
No.
When you use the term GAAP, you're referring to generally accepted accounting principles.
Yeah.
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 Just so
Sorry.
people would know that.
As opposed to the gap that we're dealing with.
Yeah,
It's a different issue. There's one A in that one.
It's
Yeah.
GAAP.
The next issue has to do with the Procurement Act. When we do our expenditure testing, we select a sample of items that have to do with that fall under the purview of the Chapter 30B. One of the items tested, there was no backup for so we couldn't document that or verify compliance with the Act.
Meaning there weren't 3 quotes? Or
Right, there weren't 3 quotes on file. The rest of them were good, so I don't think it was something that was a consistent misapplication of the law.
Was
But
this a specific department, Joe?
Is that the DPW? I don't want to speak. What was it for?
Yeah.
Was it
DPW.
DPW?
So they've been notified to...
Yeah. The next one, the final one, is a repeat from the prior year. There's been some new standards that's placed heavy emphasis on management's responsibility over internal controls. What they really want, the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants, they establish the standards. They can't establish anything that requires you to do anything, but what they can do is establish standards, what we have to report. So you don't have to do it, but we have to report a finding if you don't. So it kind of backdoors making people want to do things. What it is they think that management should be involved in the internal controls, that it shouldn't be Joe's internal controls or Mary Ann's internal controls on when to reconcile cash. They think that it should be management's internal controls. I like to say that the internal controls in most cities and towns kind of meandered their way to where they are now, either because a general law says that warrants must be signed before a bill can be paid, or because Joe and Mary Ann couldn't reconcile cash, so they decided to do something, or because of a management letter that I issued. But seldom in municipals is it because management sat down as a team and said, what are our risks and what are we doing about them? And that's what the standards say should happen, is that there should be risk assessments done and documented. Even though you have policies in place, they should be documented. And so that if somebody left, that if Joe left or Mary Ann left, that it wouldn't be that the controls walked out the door with them, that new person would come in and you could hand them something and say, here's what we expect from you. We expect cash to be reconciled every month by a certain time. The receivables should be reconciled. The debt, here's the controls over our cash and receipts. So I think it should start. We gave Joe, did we give you those narratives?
Right, and I've been working on
Okay.
it, change, you know.
So what we do when we do our audit is we do a narrative of the controls that are in place. And it's not as specific as step by step by step, but we just identify key controls that we're going to test. So I gave Joe all our narratives and suggested that they update them and eventually just sit down with the board and say, here's the controls that we think should be in place, and for you as a board to just talk about them and either accept them or say maybe there should be more done or something else that you wanted done, but to at least discuss it and have them tell you what they think the risks are.
Well, as you're aware, we're moving to Munis in July, and I'm sure that that's probably going to pose some changes to the way some of the things we're doing. And I would expect that as part of this documentation, maybe a flow chart of the entire process would help generate the appropriate
Controls.
procedures and controls.
I have started to put together a booklet, or I'm attempting to put together a booklet on all the different procedures.
That's good.
Well, I think as one board member, I could cut you some slack this year in the
I'd
process of
hold
getting
off
the
on-
Munis system up.
I wouldn't prioritize that project right now.
Well, it's
Get
not-
us up and going.
That's why I said attempted.
Yeah, well, I would spend a lot of time on it right now. I think you have other priorities personally.
Is it going to be July 1st?
And I don't mind if Dick brings us back to next year, give him something to write about.
Well, you know what? Some of these findings, like this one, we have peer reviews, and there's peer review guidance, and we see the peer review guidance, and in their guidance it says, if we find that there's not documentation of the internal controls and we don't put a finding, we get a finding.
Right.
So it kind of flows. If we're going to get a finding, then by not reporting it, we're going to report it. So, yeah, that's it on the management letter. The financial statements I'll get into in whatever detail you'd like, but the opinion letter is clean. It says the financial statements included are materially correct, and that's what Moody's and all the lenders look at right off the bat. They look at the opinion letter. There's also 2 reports in the back, one on internal control over laws and regulations and compliance with laws and regulations, and another one of the same, but just related to federal grants, and there's no findings related to those either, so it was a good, clean audit. If you could just go to page 39, if you have it. That's a lot of the financial statements that precede this are really for lenders, and they're not on the same basis of accounting as your budget basis. They're on accrual or modified accrual, and this statement is really almost a free cash statement. This is the budget from the recap. We have the original and the final and the actual. And if you look at about a third of the way down the page, on the right-hand column, it shows you the variance with the final budget. And you have $1,641,000 that your revenues came in better than budget. And so if you look the line above it, it's substantially all in the miscellaneous categories, and that was the Berry project, the revenues related to that. So that was an unbudgeted revenue that came in. So of the 1,641,000 that you generated from in free cash from the revenue side, 1.5 million of it was from the miscellaneous. So, you know, you can't expect that same kind of bump this year in
We know that.
2009. So your free cash will be, you know, you only pull out that and you'd only generate a couple thousand, 100,000 in free cash. And the same thing down on the expenditure side. It says 85,000, but the snow and ice, you'd have to pull that out because you raised that on the recap sheet. So if you look down the column, the general government generated 172 of free cash, and the debt service 145. So you probably didn't end up bonding something that you had planned on bonding. That's why the debt left so much on the table. But you were in a good free cash position, as you know, last year, and so I think the town's healthy, but has to be careful, like every other town right now.
Well, yeah, the free cash, the Berry money has been put into a debt
That's
stabilization.
been in that reserve, yeah.
fund to help
That's a
us
good
with
place for it.
capital. Concerns that I've had have been, which has had an impact on free cash. You talk about free cash, including the Berry. You know, we've kind of counted that as that doesn't count.
Well, that's because you pulled it out afterward,
Right.
yeah.
So property tax, uncollected property taxes was growing over the past 3 or 4 years. This past year, the collector's done, I think, and it probably shows up here in terms of tax liens being favorable, done I think, extraordinarily good job of trying to minimize the unpaid property taxes and collect on some of the liens. So we're watching that carefully.
Yep.
Because it does have, uncollected property taxes has a negative impact on generation of free cash,
Correct.
even though it's not a budget hit.
Even though it's not no.
In other words,
No, you don't have to, that's correct. You do not have to raise it as a revenue deficit. Does not
Yeah.
contribute to it.
under the expenditures here, the thing that pops up is on highway and public works, an over expenditure of,
That's the snow and ice.
oh, that's the snow and
Yeah.
ice, okay.
Snow and
I
ice
missed
deficit,
that,
yeah. And
sorry.
that got raised on the recap
Yeah.
sheet, yep.
Okay. So overall,
The town does a good job financial-wise, record-keeping-wise. It's, I mean, I think you have a good staff. I don't think there's any real weak links in any of your key financial offices, so.
the challenges that we face going into this coming year with federal stimulus and all the reporting and everything, what is your business done associated with following that, and what recommendations do you have?
As far as the stimulus money?
Yes.
Well, one thing I'm pretty sure it's been pretty clear to the schools and to everybody that as the stimulus money is going to be, they have to file a grant request now for it. You have to be careful to make sure that the expenditures that you're moving over are not salary expenditures, not teachers' salaries, because if you do that, then there's a mass teachers' retirement amount that may be withheld, 9%. So if you're going to move expenditures over, you should move over tuition to out of district or something that's non-salary. Otherwise, you'll lose 9%, and it'll go to the MTRS.
We were told things like fringe benefits.
Something, yeah.
In the
Is
schools.
Carl Nelson in the school department up to speed on that?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, I'm
Yes.
sure.
Oh, yes.
Did they? Yeah. You know, I heard Brad and Bruce talking this, and I think that it's still a great unknown as to what's really going to be going on. I mean, even the audit requirements that are going to be, because it is federal money, and the federal audit requirements, I don't know how that's going to play into it even yet. So I'm somewhat expecting that it's still going to be considered just another grant, and we're going to have to audit the expenditures